Hello, how are you doing today? My name is Michelle. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Um, I want to quickly share something with y'all that I learned this morning, and it just befuddled my mind. And I thought, you know what? I should go tell the people. I feel like this is how the Samaritan woman felt when she met Jesus and he told her all about herself, and she was like, I need to tell everybody. I have met a man, and this man done told me all my business, and y'all need to meet him. He might be the Messiah, you know. I feel like this is the excitement that should befall all of us when we learn about the character of God or when we study the gospel. We should just be so giddy to share it, right? Anywho, here I am. I hope you're doing good today. I promise not to keep you long. It's just going to be about a few minutes. But this week, I saw a video, and the girl basically made a statement, and she said, God has the most consistent streak out of anyone and any being. He is the most trustworthy, but so little of us have faith in him. And I was bamboozled. I feel like she hit me in my chest. And I had been just thinking about that. I was like, she has a point. There's nothing that God can do that is not worthy. There's nothing that God allows that's not just. And I know in the ground, like in our day to day, sometimes things happen, and in our mind, they don't seem right. They don't seem fair. They don't seem just. And in our human ability, it's so hard for us to believe that God, in His sovereignty and His goodness, can allow for things that are so painful and so hurtful to happen to humanity. But I feel like, and I've come to understand, it's not even a matter of feeling, but more of like a matter of understanding. I have come to understand that because God is holy, meaning He's without sin, meaning He's incapable of sinning, meaning that He's sovereign, because He's holy. That is the essence of who He is. This is entirely of who He is. Everything that He does is just. Everything that He allows to happen is just. Everything that takes place is just, okay? And everything ultimately is for His glory, right? When He carries out judgment against us and against nations, it's because in His holiness, it's just. When He bestows good gifts to us, even unto those people who we do not think are worthy of it, in His holiness, it's justified because He's incapable of sinning. And I feel like once that clicks in our minds, when things happen to us and unto other people and even in the world, and we can't quite make sense of it, and we can't quite grasp the 1+1, we can rest in the fact that He's holy and He's just, and everything that He does is good in His sight, is justified in His sight. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, I feel like in His mercy, He allowed for me to study First Chronicles chapter 17 today, and it basically just emphasized this idea that His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. So in the book of First Chronicles chapter 17, you have God making a covenant with David. Okay, He's making a promise to David. And if anybody knows the story of David, he was not a man free of sin. He was not a man free of iniquity. He did so many insidious things that God allowed for us to see by reading the Bible. And I'm pretty sure there are many other things that he did that, they just were not recorded because God did not think that they were worthy to be written down. And so, but God knows them, right? So He's not a man free of iniquity, but yet you have God consistently pursuing him and keeping him, right? And it's so bizarre, but again, His ways are not our ways and His thoughts are not our thoughts. Basically, in the book of 1 Chronicles 17, you have God making a covenant promise with David. David is asleep in his palace. He's sitting in his palace at night. And he's so perturbed by the fact that he's living in such a magnificent palace, but the Ark of the Covenant is in a tent. And because of this, he's so concerned that he calls the prophet Nathan. And he expresses his agony, and he tells him, you know what? It's not fair that I'm sitting in a palace made of cedar and wood and stone and gold, but the presence of the Lord dwells in a tent. It's not right. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Nathan. And God speaks to David and he tells him, for generation and generation, I have always dwelt in a tent. Have you ever seen me complain? Have you ever seen me raise qualms about it? I have never raised any concern over it, so why are you concerned over it? If I'm not disturbed by it, why are you disturbed by it? Have I asked you to make me a palace and you have refused? No, I've never asked for it. So if I'm not disturbed by it, why are you disturbed by it? If I have not deemed it necessary for you to build me a dwelling place, why are you concerned about it? And it's so interesting because a lot of the times our thought process is always like that one of David, right? We'll look over and we'll see that like things are happening around us and they're not necessarily clicking like in our mind and in our mental abilities, they're not necessarily making sense. And a lot of the times, because they don't make sense, we're tempted to cast away our faith in God. Because if God is such a good God, why has he allowed for war to take place? If God is such a good God, why are there children suffering in Gaza? If God is such a good God, why are we seeing all kinds of egregious sins happening to children? If God is such a good God, why did he allow for my parents to die? If God is such a good God, why did I lose my job? Why have I been jobless for so long? If he is truly in his throne, and if he's truly looking down on us, is he mocking us? Does he not see us? And when we see these things that are taking place, we are so tempted to cast our faith aside because the logic does not add up. But matters of the faith cannot, they cannot go hand in hand with matters of logic. It's either you're going to choose to believe that God is sovereign in his entire essence. It's either you're going to choose to believe that all things happen for my good and for his glory. All things, not some things, but all things. Even in our tribulations, even in our grief, even in our struggles, in our trials, we have to hold on to the faith that it's all for my good and for his glory. Right? And so David is perturbed by the fact that the presence of the Lord is in a tent. And God is like, I'm not concerned, so why are you concerned? Right? And then he goes on to make a covenant with him and says, matter of fact, you're not going to build me a dwelling place, but your generations are going to build me a dwelling place. And I don't, the first time I ever read the story, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I was like, oh yeah, cool, cool, cool. Like the generations of David are the ones who are going to do this. But then you realize that he was actually referencing to Solomon. Now, if anybody knows how Solomon came to be, Solomon was a child of Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the wife that David stole from Uriah. Okay? God says, this child who was formed from an egregious act is going to be the one who's going to build me my dwelling place. And it's not like Solomon lived the most holy life. Solomon had a weakness for women. Solomon had 1,000 wives. Okay? He was not a man free of sin. He was not blameless. But you see God choosing a man like that to build him a dwelling place. And a lot of us can look around and we see people who are receiving blessings that in our minds they don't deserve. But God says that my ways are not your ways and my thoughts are not your thoughts. The fact that God chose for his dwelling place to be built by hands that were unclean is crazy to me. it shows you how much mercy, how much mercy is extended to us. When he says that he gives us mercy fresh every day, this is what he means. Because truly and honestly, if you were to measure up your life, right, and see just on an hourly basis, the many ways in which you grieve God, you'll just come to understand that like we actually need fresh mercies every day. But back to this thought of like God's ways not being our ways and his thoughts not being our thoughts. I think we will do ourselves a great service if we chose to always err on the way of faith, you know? Like, stop trying to make sense of everything, okay? Because if you're really being honest, it's only going to give you a headache. And this is specifically for me because I feel like I am a bona fide overthinker, okay? Once the wheels in my mind start turning, it takes a lot of effort to like quiet them down, okay? And so it's a deliberate choice and an intentional act to always rest on the area of to always rest on the way of faith, because God in his sovereignty has allowed for everything to take place for a reason. It's so, at least for me, it's so encouraging to know that every moment of my life is known by God. There's not a certain anything that can happen to me that the Lord is not aware of. Okay? And so sometimes, though things may catch me unaware, nothing surprises God. And so if I can rest in the fact that like in his holy and just mind, if he has allowed for XYZ to happen and XYZ to take place, then there's glory for him there and there's goodness for me there. It just makes my life significantly easier. So what am I trying to say? Choose today to just trust that God is holy and good and all-knowing. Like David, don't lose sleep over things that God has already written off. You know, he was out here losing sleep over the fact that God is sleeping in a tent, and God is like unbothered. Don't don't try don't try to comprehend everything. It's not all it's not always all gonna make sense. The only thing that I would encourage you to do is, in every situation that befuddles your mind, to take it back onto the Lord, because he allowed for it to happen. Therefore he has a strategy for that situation. He has insight for that situation. He has knowledge about that situation. So just take it back to him. So if it doesn't make sense to you, that's fine, but it makes complete sense to him. So go to him who makes sense. Okay? Basically, that's all I was trying to say. You know, I encourage you all to go and study 1 Corinthians 17. It's a wonderful, wonderful chapter. And just trust God. He is so holy and he is so good. And he has unfailing love for us and mercy for us for each new day. So just rest in him and trust in him. That's all. You have a wonderful day.